Hello everybody and welcome to Berringer, and this is my 00 modern image layout, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the tools that I'm currently using on my layout to construct it and to do the work. Now, many of us like to talk about the locomotives and the scenery and the more interesting aspects of our layouts, but I thought I should take a brief time just to show you some of the tools that I've been using, which has made my layout a lot easier to build. Now, the first thing you're looking at directly in front of you is my table saw, which has been absolutely invaluable to my layout in constructing it, and it's very easy to use, and it just sits on my tabletop and you can just cut away. And it consists of a bag which is connected to the saw, and obviously you have your on-off switches, and then here is a guide so you can adjust the width of the wood, and also you can either do it as straight vertical lines or straight horizontal lines, and you can also do angles on it which you can adjust up and down to create the angles that you need to complete your layout. Now, I found this probably the one tool that I've used the most in my layout because it's so invaluable and it cuts such straight lines. Now, those of you who don't have anything like this and may be familiar with this tool, which is my jigsaw, which is my most dangerous tool here out of all my tools, purely because the blades do come out, protrude from the end there, and if you get it wrong, well, you don't need me to tell you where you're going to end up. And when you're trying to use that to cut a straight line, it sometimes can be a bit tricky and you don't necessarily get it straight. With this, it's quick, easy, and you can just slice through this like a hot knife through butter, really. Now, I'll give you some examples over at my layout, so if you just bear with me one moment. As you can see by my retaining wall here, this is one example of where I've used my saw, and it's perfectly straight, and this is pretty much the adequate width and adequate depth for the saw, and you don't have to worry about getting a perfectly straight line because it will do it automatically for you. And so with the jigsaw it can be a bit tricky, and it's very quick and easy. I mean, if you had to cut this whole length, which this particular length finishes just by the bridge, you can see where the join is. It will take forever with a jigsaw, and it's just so easy just to use my table saw. So that's one example of how I use my table saw. Another use for my table saw also is lengths like this, which is all cut and straight, and sometimes you don't always get the right length or the right width, and as you can see there's another join which is perfectly straight, it's perfectly joined, there's no horrendous gaps or anything in it, and again that's just because of the table saw being able to cut a straight cut. Also, this length of ply here for the base, for the frame, is also done through the table saw, and all these things, especially through ply, and it's quite thin ply at that, it just glides straight through that, and it just makes the job so much easier than trying to cut these long lengths with a jigsaw or anything like that. So that's why I have this table saw. The next tool I'd like to draw your attention to is my drill, and obviously most of you don't need me to tell you what you need this for, but this is my own personal cordless drill and various drill bits that go along with it, and obviously this again makes life so much easier than using a regular screwdriver if you have a power drill. Also various holes to make various connections to the layout. If I take you to the layout, I don't know if you can see or just about make out this little isolating hole that I've used, and it's all these little things like this, just to make holes like this, and also holes into the retaining wall to pin it, and all this sort of stuff like this. The back wall is also, you can just about make out the screws, and all these things, when you've got so many screws, as you can see there's about 3 or 4 there. When you've got a power drill, it just, again, it's an easy way of doing it and a quick way of doing it. and also with not having the corded drill, it's also, you can get over it without the cable getting in the way. So I've got that as well. We've already touched on is my jigsaw. Although I don't like using it, and it's my most dangerous tool here, I don't use it for straight lines, but I do use it for using curves and for cutting curves and awkward shapes in wood in order to get them to fit. And an example of this would be at the station. You can see we've had to take a little notch just out of the wood here, just to fit it in, and that's what you'd use the jigsaw for. Things like this, which is actually a temporary platform, this isn't actually here permanently, it's just an idea I was toying with yesterday, but you can see the idea of being able to cut curves which you couldn't do with the table saw. So you do need a jigsaw in various shapes and forms. Also I've used the jigsaw, again similar to the station end, where you've got this main board here and you've actually cut a notch into the actual retaining wall, and that's something again you couldn't really do with the table saw. Also down this end of the frame you can see there's a curve in it, and again that was also a job for the jigsaw, so that's why you'd use a jigsaw for that. Is this little mini Delta palm sander, and the reason for using this one is it's a nice little tool, it's very handy, you can get into little nooks and crannies, and an example of this at the station end or on the layout would be at the station end, and over here you'd see where this is the station end here, and rather than just cut it with a jigsaw and leave it quite rough, you just use that sander just to sand the edges off and just take the edge off of everything. It's stuff like this as well, all the edging, where when you cut it with a jigsaw it does leave these rough edges along here, and you'd use the little sander just to clean it up and just to polish it up. So again, that's what I would use the sander for. The next tool I'll show you is my corded tool, my corded drill. Now the reason why I have this is actually it's a very old tool that I bought when I was working at the DIY store, and I got it for actually a £5, believe it or not, and it still works and it does a grand job, because the advantage of this one over the cordless one is power and constant power that you get. Now I've got these wood drill bit sets to create holes, and when you're trying to create holes into wood, unless it's very fine wood, it's a bit of a job for the cordless power drill. It drains a lot of the battery power, so I tend to, when I make holes in the wood, then it's better to use, and I need one of these pieces, I will use the corded drill just for the consistency of power and knowing that you'll get the job done without the battery being drained off from the cordless drill. And an example of this on my layout, I'll show you currently drilling holes. This is actually just a temporary power supply which I just fitted. So basically this here is just for the power supply, which is just a plug and play, and that's connected to the various tracks that I have operating, because the wiring hasn't really been done properly on this layout as yet. But what I wanted to do is just keep it simple and keep it as a plug and play thing, and it's actually running on an analog and not a DCC, just purely down to cost as well. So, but anyway, again, this wood, if you can see it underneath, is quite thick, and a cordless drill could probably do it, but you wouldn't be able to get, say, 2 or 3 holes drilled, because it would just drain out too much of the power. So you'd use like the corded drill to get through it, and that will just get through it quite quickly. Also, you can't actually see it underneath here, but behind here, as you can see, the layout's on the top here. Underneath, it's connected to the bookcase, which is where the layout is. But behind that, I don't know if you can see the way it rests on these sort of pillars and things. There's actually holes drilled through them, pre-drilled, specifically for wiring. So when I got to the point that I wanted to rewire, if I needed to go under there wasn't going to be an issue of feeding the wires through, because the holes were already pre-drilled. Also, I have 2 isolating switches just here, and again it's the same thing, it's just same principle, just drill straight through that with the corded drill and it just goes through it straight through. Yeah, one of my favourite drills, one of my favourite tools I should say rather, is this Bosch belt sander, and I enjoy using this a lot. It basically just grinds and sands down very, very quickly. Now the point of this tool is the reason why I have this tool and also I have the mini one, is that the mini one is good for certain jobs, whereas this big one, the belt sander, will sand through very, very quickly. And because of the width of the actual belt sanding paper, it's pretty much the right width for platforms, and that's what I really use it for. And I'll give you an example of that over at the layout. This is one such example on my platform here. My platforms are all made out of MDF because it's a lot cheaper than using the Hornby plastic sections, and it's going to be more realistic once it's finished. Now, as you can see, it's tapered, and that is purely done to do with the belt sander, because it will just literally sand that down really, really quickly, whereas with the mini one it will take a lot longer to do. So that's why I've got the belt sander, and it just does it so quickly and so easily. And I've done it on all the platforms, and even on this one here. And also to get curves as well, it's pretty good at doing smooth curves and trying to create curves on the MDF, which is pretty good. So I've found that to be a very quick and efficient tool to get the work done. And all I've done is I've got a, because the sides will be used will be the Pico sides, and the platform Pico edging I've just used to create this guide of a line so that it's level with the Pico. So that's how I've got the kind of the length and the height and the gradient to create this. And like I said, it's really created a really, really nice tapered platform. And like I said, it's been done on all the platform ends that is needed doing. At the other end, one end, I'll show you another example of a tapered platform end, and this is the sort of thing that I use the belt sander top for. And it makes a lot of mess, but it creates such a good effect, and it's just, it looks very, very good. The effect is very good once it's all done.